The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. James Anderson stood beside the narrow bed, his daughter's small hand wrapped around two of his fingers, her grip weak but insistent. Emily's heart monitor beeped in irregular stutters, each skip sending ice through his veins. The pediatric cardiologist had left 3 minutes ago with words that hung in the air like smoke. Stress wasn't helping her condition. Emily's eyelids fluttered, her 6-year-old face pale against the white pillowcase. She'd drawn him a picture earlier before the episode, before the ambulance. Purple crayon hearts floating above stick figures, one tall, one small. His throat closed every time he looked at it. Have you ever been told your grief has an expiration date? That 4 years is enough? That it's time to pack away the memories and move forward like nothing carved a hole in your chest? James had heard it from well-meaning friends, from his mother, from Ashley. Especially from Ashley. She meant well, they all did, but good intentions didn't understand that some losses don't heal, they just become part of who you are. The doctor's words echoed, emotional chaos. Emily needed stability. James looked at his daughter's face and saw Michelle in the curve of her cheek, the way her eyebrows drew together when she was trying to be brave. 4 years ago, cancer had taken his wife. 2 years of watching her fight, watching her fade, holding her hand. Until there was nothing left to hold. Emily had been 2 years old, barely old enough to remember her mother's voice, but old enough to feel the absence like gravity. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been simpler. Not easy, never easy, but simpler. James had been finishing a website redesign for a local bakery, the kind of work that paid bills without demanding much of his soul. His Denver apartment was small but clean, the second bedroom converted into Emily's kingdom of stuffed animals and art supplies. Michelle's photo still held its place on the living room mantel, a candid shot from their honeymoon in Sedona, her smile bright against red rock formations. Ashley had stopped commenting on it directly, but he caught her glances, the way she positioned herself to avoid looking at it. Emily had been sprawled on the floor, tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on a new drawing. Her latest obsession was portraits, stick figures evolving into something more detailed, more observant. She held up her work with both hands, a gap-toothed grin splitting her face. The drawing showed 3 people. 2 he recognized immediately, himself rendered in careful brown crayon and Emily in purple, her favorite color, Michelle's favorite color. The third figure stood apart, taller than him, with long dark hair and no smile. "Who's this one, baby girl?" Emily tilted her head, considering her own artwork with an artist's critical eye. "The quiet lady. She has sad eyes." Something in his chest tightened. Emily had only met Patricia Hernandez once, briefly at Ashley's apartment 2 weeks prior. A formal introduction, handshakes, and polite conversation that lasted maybe 20 minutes before Patricia excused herself, claiming deadline pressure from her editor. Ashley's mother was exactly as described. Quiet, observing, and yes, sad. Not the grief-stricken sadness of fresh loss, but the weathered kind, the sort that settles into bones and becomes part of a person's architecture. "That's Miss Patricia, Ashley's mom." Emily nodded, already reaching for another crayon. "She looks at you like you're a puzzle." Out of the mouths of children. James had felt that assessing gaze during their brief meeting. The way Patricia's eyes lingered a moment too long, reading, cataloging, judging. She'd been polite, cordial even, but he'd sensed the reservation underneath. Ashley had waved it off later, insisting her mother was like that with everyone, protective and analytical from decades of investigative journalism. That evening, Ashley had brought up Aspen over dinner. She'd been planning it for weeks, a surprise weekend getaway, just the 3 of them. 4, actually. Patricia would be joining. "Family bonding," Ashley said, her enthusiasm filling his kitchen like sunlight. She moved around his space with easy familiarity, 10 months of dating granting her a drawer in his dresser and a toothbrush in his bathroom. "Mom barely takes time off. This is huge, and Emily will love Real snow, the mountains, everything. Emily had looked up from her mac and cheese, eyes wide. Real snow, Daddy? He'd felt the trap closing, gentle but inescapable. Saying no meant disappointing his daughter, and he'd rather cut off his own hand. But the thought of a weekend with Patricia's analytical stare, with Ashley's subtle pressure to move forward, to let go, to become someone he wasn't sure he could be. His stomach had knotted. Please, Emily added, and that was that. 2 days before the trip, Ashley had broached the subject he'd been dreading. They were at his apartment, Emily asleep in her room, the two of them on his couch with late-night television playing unwatched. Ashley's fingers traced idle patterns on his arm, her body warm against his side. I've been thinking, she began, and his muscles tensed. Thinking never led anywhere comfortable. It's been 4 years since Michelle passed. That's a long time, James. He didn't respond, watching colors flicker across the TV screen. I'm not saying you should forget her, I'd never say that, but maybe it's time to, turn the page a little. What does that mean? Ashley sat up, turning to face him. Her expression was gentle, caring, everything he should have wanted. The photo on the mantel. Emily's bedtime stories about her mom every single night. I love that you honor Michelle's memory, but sometimes it feels like she's still here. Like there's 3 people in this relationship. The words landed like stones. James pulled back, creating space between them. She is still here. She's Emily's mother. She's part of who I am. I know, baby, I know. Ashley reached for his hand. I'm just saying maybe we could create some new traditions, new stories. Emily's 6 now. She barely remembers Michelle. Those bedtime stories, they're more for you than her. Wrong. So completely wrong. James stood, needing distance, needing air. Those stories are so she knows who her mother was, so Michelle isn't just a face in a photo. James, she was brave. She fought like hell. Emily deserves to know that. Ashley's face fell, hurt flickering across her features. I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to build a future with you. But I can't compete with a ghost. The word hung between them, sharp and ugly. Ghost. As if Michelle's memory was something haunting him, something to be exorcised. He'd almost ended things right there, almost told Ashley that if she couldn't understand this fundamental piece of him, they were done. But then he thought of Emily's excitement about snow, about the trip, about disappointing his daughter again because he couldn't make relationships work. I'm sorry, Ashley said quickly, reading his face. That came out wrong. I didn't mean ghost. I just meant, can we find some balance? That's all I'm asking. He'd nodded, not trusting his voice, and they'd gone to bed with the tension unresolved, hovering between them like humidity before a storm. The morning they left for Aspen, Emily had been awake before dawn, her small suitcase packed and repacked 3 times. She'd insisted on bringing her art supplies, her stuffed elephant, and a framed photo of Michelle that usually sat on her nightstand. James had watched her tuck it into her backpack with careful reverence, and his heart had cracked a little wider. The drive took 3 hours, Denver falling away into highway, then mountain roads, then the stunning vertical world of the Rockies in late autumn. Snow already dusted the peaks, and Emily pressed her face against the window, breath fogging the glass as she took in every detail. Ashley drove, chattering about the lodge, the slopes, the activities they could do. James listened with half his attention, the other half occupied by Emily's wonder and his own growing unease. Patricia was meeting them there, driving separately from her place in Boulder. She'd moved there after her husband died, Ashley had explained, needing distance from the Denver home they'd shared, from the memories that soaked every wall. James understood that impulse more than he'd admitted. The lodge exceeded expectations. Timber and stone construction, floor-to-ceiling windows framing impossible views of snow-covered pines and distant peaks. The lobby featured a massive fireplace, flames dancing behind an iron grate, the smell of wood smoke mixing with fresh coffee from the adjacent cafe. Guests moved through the space in expensive outdoor gear. the quiet affluence of people who could afford weekend escapes to luxury mountain retreats. Ashley checked them in while James helped Emily with her backpack, his daughter's eyes huge as she took in the vaulted ceilings, the chandelier made from antlers, the mounted elk head that seemed to watch them from above the fireplace. "That's so big," Emily whispered, pointing at the elk. "Majestic, right?" A woman's voice, familiar but unexpected in its proximity. Patricia Hernandez stood 3 feet away, appearing as if summoned, her presence solid and immediate. She wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except a plain watch. Everything about her suggested function over form, a woman who'd spent too many years in hostile environments to worry about aesthetic appeal. "Miss Patricia," Emily's shyness evaporated in the face of genuine interest. "Did you see it? The big deer?" "Elk, actually. Bigger than deer. See the antlers?" Patricia crouched to Emily's level, pointing out the differences with the easy authority of someone used to explaining complex things simply. James watched his daughter lean in, absorbing the information like a sponge, and felt that twist of unease again. Patricia hadn't smiled, not really, but her expression had softened around the edges. Ashley emerged from the check-in desk with keycards, her face bright with forced cheer. "Mom, you made it. How was the drive?" "Uneventful." Patricia stood and the softness vanished, replaced by that assessing neutrality. She hugged her daughter, a brief, almost formal embrace, then nodded at James. "James." "Patricia, good to see you." "Is it?" The question landed with quiet impact, not hostile but not entirely friendly either. Before he could formulate a response, she'd already turned back to Ashley. "Which rooms?" They had 2 adjoining suites on the 3rd floor, both with balconies overlooking the slopes. Ashley and Emily would share one, James in the other, with Patricia across the hall. Separate but connected, the arrangement both practical and loaded with unspoken implications. James caught Patricia's glance as they sorted luggage, a flicker of something that might have been approval at the sleeping arrangements. That evening, they ate at the lodge restaurant, a warmly lit space with exposed beams and windows that framed the darkening mountains. Emily sat between James and Ashley, animated and chattering about everything she'd seen, her earlier shyness completely gone. Patricia sat across from James, quiet, her attention divided between her salmon and her granddaughter's running commentary. "And tomorrow I'm going to see real snow up close, not just from the car, and maybe we can build a snowman if there's enough, and Daddy said maybe there are deer we can see if we're quiet." "Elk," Patricia corrected gently. "But yes, if you're quiet and lucky." Emily nodded seriously, filing away this information. Then she turned to Ashley. "Are you coming to see the elk with us?" Ashley laughed, reaching over to ruffle Emily's curls. "I'm going snowboarding with some people I met in the lobby, but you guys will have more fun without me anyway." James felt it then, the subtle shift, the pieces moving into place. He looked at Patricia, found her already watching him, and understanding passed between them without words. This had been planned. Not explicitly, maybe, but Ashley had orchestrated this, throwing him and her mother together, forcing proximity and interaction. "Actually," James said carefully, "I was thinking Emily and I could just hang around the lodge tomorrow. Maybe the indoor pool." "In Aspen?" Patricia's eyebrow arched, the first real expression he'd seen from her all day. "Seems like a waste." Emily's face fell, her excitement dimming. "But the snow, Daddy." He was trapped and he knew it. Saying no now meant disappointing Emily, meant looking like exactly the kind of person Patricia probably already thought he was. Someone still so buried in grief he couldn't function in the present. He wanted to be angry at Ashley for this manipulation, but her face showed only innocent encouragement, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "There's a light trail," Patricia said, her tone neutral, informational. 2 miles, minimal elevation gain, good for kids. I was planning to walk it myself. You're welcome to join." It wasn't quite an invitation, more a statement of fact with space left for his decision. James looked at Emily's hopeful face, at Ashley's encouraging smile, at Patricia's unreadable expression. "What do you think, baby girl? Want to go on a mountain walk?" "Yes!" Emily's entire body vibrated with enthusiasm. "Can I bring my art stuff to draw the elk?" "Sure thing." "Then it's settled," Ashley said, satisfaction clear in her voice. "You guys have your nature walk, I'll shred some powder, and we'll all meet back for dinner." "Perfect." Nothing about this felt perfect, but James kept that thought to himself. Later, after Emily had been tucked into bed in Ashley's suite, after his daughter had demanded her usual bedtime story about Michelle, how she'd been brave during chemotherapy, how she'd made the nurses laugh even when she was tired, how she'd loved purple flowers and terrible puns. James stood on his balcony, staring at stars impossibly bright in the thin mountain air. A sliding door opened nearby. Patricia stepped onto her own balcony 20 feet away, separated by a privacy divider but close enough for conversation. She didn't acknowledge him at first, just stood there with her hands wrapped around a mug, steam rising into the cold. "She's testing you," Patricia said finally, her voice carrying easily in the quiet. "Excuse me?" "My daughter, this whole setup, she's testing whether you can move forward." James gripped the balcony railing, cold metal biting into his palms. "Is that what you think I should do? Move forward?" "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night." Patricia took a sip from her mug, still not looking at him. "But I also think you should know that Ashley doesn't understand what she's asking. She's never lost anyone. Not really. Her father died, but she was 18, angry at him for years of absence anyway. Grief for her is theoretical. And for you?" Now she turned, and in the pale light from her room, James could see the weight she carried, the same heaviness he recognized in his own mirror. "My husband died in a construction accident 10 years ago. Scaffolding collapse, took 4 men with it. I was in Florida covering hurricane aftermath. Got the call while standing in someone's destroyed living room. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You know how this works. Sorry doesn't mean anything to people like us." She paused, and something shifted in her expression, a decision being made. "I spent the next 8 years running, took every dangerous assignment I could find. Hurricane Katrina, the Parkland shooting. Anywhere human suffering was concentrated, I went. Told myself it was important work, bearing witness, telling stories that needed telling. Wasn't it? Maybe. But it was also running. Easier to document other people's tragedies than sit with my own." Patricia turned back to the mountains, her profile sharp against the darkness. "Ashley grew up with a mother who was physically present maybe 4 months a year. The rest of the time I was chasing disasters, literally and figuratively. She learned to be self-sufficient, learned not to need me. And now she has abandonment issues she doesn't even recognize." James didn't know what to say to that, this sudden confession from a woman who'd given him nothing but cool assessment until now. "The point is," Patricia continued, "she's going to push you to move on because she thinks that's what love requires. Complete presence, no competing loyalties, no divided attention. She doesn't understand that grief doesn't work that way, that you can love someone new and still honor someone lost. Do you?" James asked. "Understand that?" "I'm learning." She finished her drink, set the mug on the balcony rail. "Tomorrow's walk. I meant it about it being good for kids, but I also meant it about honest conversation. If you can't handle that, don't come." "Why do you care?" Patricia looked at him then, really looked, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Not attraction, nothing like that, but recognition. Like looking at a mirror that showed not your face, but your soul. "Because I see myself in you," she said simply. "The walls, the careful distance, the way you're trying to be present for people who need you while most of you is still somewhere else. And I know how that ends. How? Alone, even when you're surrounded by people." She picked up her mug, moved toward her door. 8 a.m. Trailhead is a quarter mile from the lodge. Dress warm." She disappeared inside before he could respond, leaving him on the balcony with nothing but cold air and thoughts he didn't want to examine too closely. He found Emily's latest drawing on his nightstand when he finally went to bed. She must have left it there while he was on the balcony. The image showed 4 figures now: himself, Emily, Ashley, and Patricia. But something was different. Patricia and he both had the same detail added: small purple hearts, barely visible, floating near their chests like wounds or windows. And Ashley stood slightly apart, her stick figure face turned away from the others. Emily's handwriting, still shaky with youth, labeled each figure. Under Patricia, the quiet lady. Under himself, Daddy's castle. And under Ashley, the lady who wants us to forget. James sat on the edge of his bed, holding the drawing, and felt his carefully constructed walls shake. Emily was 6, she saw everything, understood more than he'd given her credit for, and she was scared. Scared that moving forward meant erasing her mother, scared that loving Ashley meant betraying Michelle's memory. He couldn't let that fear take root. Whatever happened this weekend, whatever Patricia's warnings meant, whatever Ashley's tests revealed, Emily's emotional stability came first, always. He texted Ashley, "We need to talk when we're back in Denver about expectations and what I can give." Her response came immediately, as if she'd been waiting for contact. "I love you. We'll figure it out." But she'd misunderstood or chosen to, and he didn't have the energy to clarify over text. Tomorrow's hike with Patricia suddenly felt less like a nature walk and more like a reckoning. A woman who understood loss, who'd admitted to running from it for years, who looked at him and saw herself. What would she say when there was no balcony divider? No escape, just mountain silence and truth. James turned off the light but didn't sleep. Somewhere in the lodge, Ashley dreamed of futures he wasn't sure he could provide. Across the hall, Patricia probably lay awake too, her own ghosts keeping company. And in the next room, Emily slept with Michelle's photo tucked under her pillow, a 6-year-old girl trying to hold on to a mother she barely remembered. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Brilliant sunshine, temperature in the high 30s, perfect conditions for a moderate hike. James dressed in layers, helped Emily into her warmest clothes, and packed her backpack with water, snacks, and art supplies she'd insisted on bringing. Ashley was already gone, having left early with her snowboarding group. A quick kiss and a wave and promises to be careful. Patricia waited at the trailhead with the kind of stillness that suggested she'd been there a while. She wore hiking boots that had clearly seen real use, cargo pants with multiple pockets, and a jacket that looked military surplus. Her backpack was compact but professionally packed, every strap adjusted perfectly. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Morning," James offered, his breath fogging in the cold air. Emily bounced beside him, too excited to be still. "Weather's good now. Supposed to change this afternoon, but we'll be back before then." Patricia knelt in front of Emily, checking her jacket zipper, her gloves, her hat. The gesture was automatic, protective, and Emily submitted to the inspection without complaint. They started walking. The trail wound through pine forest, the path clear and well-marked, wooden posts every 100 yards with trail names and mileage. Emily walked between them, her small legs working hard to keep pace, her breath coming in excited puffs. She pointed out everything: a bird, a pine cone, frost patterns on bark, the way sunlight filtered through branches. For the first mile, they kept to safe topics: the weather, the lodge amenities, Emily's school, and her favorite subjects. Patricia asked questions with genuine interest, listening to Emily's rambling answers with patience James hadn't expected. His daughter responded to that attention, opening up, telling stories about her friends, her teacher, her art projects. "I'm drawing a big picture of everyone I love," Emily announced, hopping over a small rock. "It has Daddy and Mama Michelle and Ashley and you." Patricia's stride hitched almost imperceptibly. "Me? Yeah, you're interesting. Your eyes are sad, but not mean sad. Thinking sad." "Thinking sad," Patricia repeated, testing the phrase. That's very observant. Daddy says artists have to see true, not what they want, but what's really there. James felt Patricia's glance but kept his eyes on the trail. He hadn't realized Emily paid such close attention to things he'd said in passing. Lessons he'd tried to impart about honesty in art and life. They reached a clearing with a bench, probably a quarter way through the trail. Patricia suggested a water break, and Emily immediately pulled out her sketch pad, settling on the bench to draw the view. The mountains rose in layers, each ridge a different shade of blue-gray, snowcaps brilliant white against the sky. Patricia moved a few steps away, ostensibly to give Emily space, but James recognized the invitation. He joined her at the clearing's edge, where the trail dropped away into a small valley thick with trees. "She's special," Patricia said quietly. "Emily, the way she sees things." "She is. You're doing a good job with her. That's not easy alone." James's jaw tightened. "I'm not alone. Ashley helps. My mother visits. I have support. I didn't mean logistics. I meant emotionally. Raising a child while grieving, keeping your own pain from crushing theirs. That's high-wire work." He didn't respond, unsure where this was leading. Patricia continued, her voice taking on a different quality, more personal, more raw. "After my husband died, I threw myself into work, left Ashley with my sister for months at a time. Told myself I was doing important things, documenting truth, giving voice to the voiceless, and I was. But I was also abandoning my daughter. Ashley seems fine. On the surface. Underneath, she has a template for relationships that says people leave. So she overcompensates, tries to lock things down, control outcomes, which is why she pushes you to move forward. She thinks if you let go of Michelle, you won't leave her." The analysis was uncomfortably accurate. James had felt that pressure, that need for commitment and certainty that seemed disproportionate to their 10-month relationship. "I can't let go of Michelle," he said flatly. "I won't." "I'm not asking you to." Patricia turned to face him fully. "I'm telling you that Ashley will keep asking, and eventually you'll have to choose her comfort or your truth." "That's not fair." "No, but it's reality." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped even lower, meant only for him. "I see my husband in every sunrise. It's been 10 years, James. A decade. And I still reach for him some mornings, still turn to tell him things before remembering he's gone. People like us, we don't move on. We just learn to carry it better." Something in his chest cracked, a wall he hadn't realized was already weakening. This woman, this near stranger, understood in a way Ashley never could. Not because Ashley was cruel or stupid, but because she'd never stood in this particular hell, never had to figure out how to keep breathing when the person who taught you how was gone. "Daddy, look!" Emily's voice cut through the moment. She held up her sketch pad and both adults moved to see. She'd drawn the mountains, but she'd also added figures. 3 people on the trail, recognizable by their clothes. And above them, sketched in light purple, a 4th figure, translucent, watching. "Who's that?" Patricia asked gently. "Mama Michelle. She's always watching." Emily said it matter-of-factly, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Daddy says people we love don't really leave. They stay in our hearts." James felt his throat close. Those were his words, his bedtime reassurances, but hearing them repeated here, on this mountain, with Patricia watching, it felt like exposure, like his daughter had revealed something he'd meant to keep private. Patricia crouched beside Emily, studying the drawing with serious attention. "Your mama was lucky to have you remember her so beautifully. Do you remember your husband?" The question was innocent, childlike, but it landed like a stone in still water. Patricia's face didn't change expression, but something behind her eyes shifted. "Every day. Does it make you sad?" "Sometimes, but mostly it makes me grateful I had him at all." Emily nodded, processing this, then went back to adding details to her drawing. Patricia stood, meeting James's eyes, and he saw the cost of that honesty, the way it had taken something from her to admit that to a 6-year-old. They continued hiking. The trail climbed gradually, the forest thickening around them. Emily ranged ahead, never quite out of sight, her energy seemingly endless. James and Patricia walked in companionable silence now. The earlier tension transformed into something else, something he couldn't quite name. The sky began to change around the 1 hour mark. Clouds moved in faster than predicted, gray and heavy, swallowing the sun. The temperature dropped noticeably and wind picked up, making the pines sway and whisper. "We should head back," Patricia said, her tone shifting to something more urgent, more professional. "This doesn't look good." They turned around, calling Emily back from where she'd wandered ahead, but the weather deteriorated with shocking speed. Within 15 minutes, the first snowflakes fell, light and almost playful. Within 30, it was a full assault, thick flakes driving horizontally on wind that had teeth. Visibility dropped. The trail markers, so clear before, became harder to spot through the white. Emily pressed close to James, her earlier excitement replaced by fear as the wind howled and snow stung exposed skin. "Stay together!" Patricia ordered, her voice carrying authority. "Hold hands, don't let go!" James gripped Emily's hand on one side, felt Patricia take his other, linking them in a chain. They pushed forward, retracing their steps, but something was wrong. The trail looked different, or maybe the snow had already obscured enough that everything looked the same, white, endless, disorienting. James's phone showed 1 bar, then none. He tried calling for help anyway, got nothing. Battery at 60%, worthless without signal. "We're off the path," Patricia said, stopping them. Her face was flushed with cold, snow collecting in her hair, but her expression remained focused. "We've been going uphill for 5 minutes. The return should be downhill." Panic clawed at James's throat. Emily was shivering now, her hand cold even through gloves. Her lips had taken on a faintly blue tinge that made his heart seize. The heart murmur, usually manageable, became dangerous when she was stressed or cold. Cold, too long, and... "We need shelter," Patricia cut through his spiraling thoughts. "Now. Hypothermia will kill us before we find our way back in this." "Where?" The forest looked the same in every direction, white and hostile. Patricia scanned the terrain with the systematic precision of someone trained to assess quickly. She pointed downhill, perpendicular to their current direction. "That way, lower elevation, better chance of a cabin or hunting shelter. That's away from the lodge. Right now, survival beats direction. Move." They stumbled downhill, Emily between them, her small body growing heavier as cold sapped her energy. James tried to carry her, but the terrain was treacherous, hidden roots and rocks beneath new snow, making every step a gamble. Patricia took Emily's other arm, and together they half-carried her, 2 adults fighting mountain and weather for a child's life. James's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Emily unconscious, Emily's heart giving out, search and rescue finding them too late, 3 frozen bodies in a white wilderness, Ashley receiving the call, his mother at a funeral. Everything he'd survived, everything he'd built since Michelle's death, rendered meaningless because he'd taken his daughter on a simple hike. "There!" Patricia's voice cut through the wind and his panic. She pointed ahead, and through the white chaos, James could make out a darker shape. A structure, small and weathered but solid. They reached it in what felt like hours but was probably minutes. A hunting cabin, old but intact, the door secured with a simple latch. Patricia shouldered it open and they stumbled into musty darkness that felt like salvation. The cabin was maybe 10 by 12 feet. 1 room, dirt floor, a rusted wood stove in the corner, a few broken shelves, and against the far wall, a bench built into the logs. Patricia dropped her pack and immediately began assessing resources with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "James, check Emily, get her wet layers off." He fumbled with his daughter's jacket, his fingers clumsy with cold and fear. Emily was shaking violently now, her teeth chattering, her skin pale and clammy. The emergency heart monitor he always carried in his pocket showed elevated rate, irregular rhythm. Terror turned his blood to ice. Baby girl, talk to me. You with me? Cold, Daddy. I know, sweetheart, I know we're going to get you warm. Patricia had found matches in a metal box on a shelf, old but dry. She grabbed wood from a pile that looked ancient, testing pieces for rot. Most were solid enough. She built a fire in the stove with quick, practiced movements, striking matches with hands that shook from cold but never wavered in purpose. The third match caught. Small flame, vulnerable. But Patricia nursed it with paper she'd torn from her own notebook, feeding it kindling, building it slowly until real fire bloomed. She adjusted the damper, and smoke began drawing up the chimney mostly. The cabin filled with warmth that felt like a miracle. James had Emily wrapped in his jacket and hers both, holding her against his chest, trying to share body heat. But she was still shivering, still too cold, her lips still that terrible blue that made him want to scream. Get those wet socks off her, feet too. Patricia appeared beside him with a wool blanket she'd found, musty and moth-eaten but dry. We need skin-to-skin contact. It's the fastest way to warm her core temperature. James stripped Emily's socks, her small feet ice-cold to touch. He wrapped them in the blanket, held her tighter, but it wasn't enough. Emily's shaking was getting worse, and the heart monitor's beeping made his own heart race in sympathetic panic. Patricia crouched beside them, her face serious but calm. James, listen to me. We need both our body heat, all three of us together under the blanket, sharing warmth. It's not ideal, but it's what works. He nodded, past caring about propriety or implications. This was Emily's life. Nothing else mattered. They arranged themselves by the growing fire, Emily between them, all three wrapped in the blanket and James's jacket and Patricia's coat. A cocoon of shared warmth. Patricia's body pressed against Emily's back. James held his daughter's front, and they became a unit, a single organism fighting cold together. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Emily's shivering began to ease, her breathing regulated. The blue faded from her lips, replaced by healthier pink. James felt tears on his face and didn't care, relief so intense it hurt. Patricia's hand found his over Emily's small form, squeezed once, a wordless message. She's okay. We did it. They stayed like that as the fire grew stronger, as warmth filled the tiny cabin, as the storm raged outside with violence that would have killed them if they'd stayed exposed. Emily fell asleep eventually, exhausted by fear and cold, her small body going limp against James's chest. Only then did he let himself breathe, let himself feel, let himself acknowledge how close they'd come to dying on a mountain, because he'd wanted to prove something, to Ashley, to Patricia, to himself. Thank you, he whispered into the firelit dimness. Patricia didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried something he hadn't heard before, vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. I've seen people die, documented it, photographed it, written about it. But today, watching Emily turn blue, her voice broke and she stopped. James understood. Understanding horror as a journalist was different from experiencing it as a participant, as someone responsible, as someone who cared. They sat in silence, holding his daughter between them, listening to wind shriek outside and fire crackle inside. And James felt something shift in the space between them. Not attraction, nothing romantic, but connection, recognition. Two people who'd survived loss, learning they could survive this too, together. Emily stirred against him, murmured something that might have been, "Mama," and settled back into sleep. The storm outside showed no signs of stopping. They were trapped here at least until morning. Maybe longer. James closed his eyes and felt Patricia's steady breathing against his back, felt Emily's heartbeat against his chest, and thought about Michelle, about what she would have wanted for him, for their daughter, about whether honoring the dead meant staying frozen in grief or learning to live again without forgetting. He didn't have answers, But here in this cabin with a woman who understood loss and a daughter who needed him to be more than his pain, he thought maybe he could start looking for them. The fire burned on, and outside the mountain tried to kill them with indifferent white fury, and inside, 3 people who shouldn't have been together held on to each other and survived. Emily woke sometime after midnight, disoriented and groggy. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the cabin in orange twilight. James felt her stir against him, her small voice cutting through the darkness. "Daddy, where are we?" "Safe, baby girl. We're in a cabin. There was a storm." She processed this with the resilience of childhood, accepting the strange situation because her father was there and therefore everything must be manageable. "I'm thirsty." Patricia moved immediately, disentangling herself from their shared warmth cocoon with practiced efficiency. She'd found old canteens earlier, had filled them with snow and set them near the fire to melt. She poured water into a dented metal cup, tested the temperature with her finger, then handed it to Emily. "Small sips. Your stomach needs to wake up too." Emily drank obediently, her eyes tracking between the 2 adults with that sharp observation James had learned to expect. She handed the cup back, then burrowed against him again, seeking warmth and security in equal measure. "Can you tell me a story about Mama Michelle?" James felt Patricia's attention sharpen in the darkness. This was his nightly ritual, the one Ashley found so problematic, exposed now to the woman who claimed to understand. "Which one do you want to hear?" "The brave one, when she was sick but still made everyone laugh." He settled his daughter more comfortably, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his ribs, grateful beyond words that rhythm had stabilized. His voice dropped into storytelling cadence, worn smooth by repetition. "Your mama had to go to the hospital a lot when she was sick. The treatments made her tired, made her feel bad, but she never let that stop her from being herself. There was this one nurse, Sharon, who was scared of mice. Your mama found out and brought in this tiny toy mouse, the kind you wind up and it walks across the floor." Emily giggled, knowing this story by heart but loving it anyway. "She put it in Sharon's pocket when she wasn't looking. Then your mama waited, all innocent, until Sharon reached in for her pen and screamed." Emily finished, her laughter bright in the dim cabin. "And then Mama Michelle laughed so hard she cried, and Sharon laughed too, even though she was mad." "That's right. Because your mama believed that being sick didn't mean being sad. She said life's too short to forget joy, even in hard times." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, in that direct way children have of cutting through pretense, she asked the question James had been dreading. "Does Miss Ashley make you feel joy?" The cabin seemed to hold its breath. James felt Patricia's stillness, knew she was listening, waiting for his answer. He could lie, offer the easy platitude, the thing a 6-year-old should hear. But Michelle had taught him something about honesty, too, about respecting children's intelligence. "Ashley makes me feel safe, comfortable, like things might be okay." That's not the same as joy. No, it wasn't. Emily had identified in 6 words what he'd been avoiding for months. Safety and comfort were valuable, important even, but they weren't the bone-deep happiness Michelle had brought him. They weren't enough. Patricia shifted in the darkness, adding wood to the fire. Flames caught, illuminating her face in profile, and James saw something there he recognized: the cost of truth-telling, the weight of honesty when silence would be easier. "Your daddy's still learning how to feel joy again," Patricia said quietly, her words careful but direct. "When someone we love dies, happiness feels like betrayal for a while, like we're not supposed to laugh because they can't anymore." Emily turned to look at Patricia, her young face serious. "But Mama Michelle laughed when she was sick. She'd want Daddy to laugh too." "You're absolutely right, but knowing that and feeling it are different things." James's throat tightened. This woman who'd spent maybe 3 hours total in his company before today understood the exact shape of his struggle. Ashley wanted him to move forward, to choose happiness, but she didn't grasp that the choosing wasn't the hard part. The hard part was believing he deserved it. Emily yawned, exhaustion reclaiming her. She tucked herself against James's chest again, her words slurring with approaching sleep. I like Miss Patricia. She tells true things. Within minutes, his daughter's breathing evened into sleep's steady rhythm. James remained motionless, afraid to break whatever spell had settled over the cabin, this strange pocket of honesty in a dishonest world. She's right, you know. Patricia's voice came soft from across the small space. I do tell true things. Learned it the hard way. Lies in journalism get people killed. Lies in life do the same, just slower. What's the true thing you're not telling now? The question surprised him as much as her. He hadn't meant to ask, hadn't consciously thought it, but some instinct recognized she was holding back. Patricia took her time responding, and when she did, her voice carried a different quality. Not the professional journalist or the cautious mother, but something raw. That I envy you, you and Emily. This bond you have, this honesty, this ritual of remembering together. I never gave Ashley that. After her father died, I shut down. Packed his things within a week, sold the house within a month, moved to Boulder, and threw myself into work. Ashley had to grieve alone or with my sister while I documented other people's losses. Why? Because it was easier to witness strangers' pain than feel my own. Because if I kept moving, kept working, I could pretend the grief was manageable, containable. I told myself I was doing important work, giving voice to the voiceless, and I was, but I was also running. And Ashley paid the price. James understood that impulse more than he wanted to admit. How many times had he lost himself in code, in work, in the mechanical tasks of single parenthood, anything to avoid sitting with the enormity of what he'd lost. That's why she pushes me about Michelle. She thinks if I let go completely, I'll stay. She does, but she's wrong about what letting go means. It's not erasing. It's integration, making the lost part of your story without letting it be the whole story. Patricia paused, and in the firelight he saw her wipe at her eyes. I'm still learning that myself. 10 years later, still learning. Do you regret it? The work, the running? Every single day. But regret doesn't undo the past. It just teaches you how to do better going forward. They fell into silence. The kind that felt less empty than full, weighted with shared understanding. Outside, wind continued battering the cabin, but its fury seemed distant now, manageable. The fire provided warmth and light, and Emily slept peacefully between them, proof they'd survived the mountain's attempt to claim them. James found himself studying Patricia in the flickering light, the lines around her eyes that spoke of squinting through viewfinders and into harsh truths, the set of her shoulders that carried a decade of chosen solitude, the way her hands never quite stilled, always ready for the next crisis. She was nothing like Michelle, who'd been warm and immediate and present in every moment. But Patricia had something Michelle would have respected, unflinching honesty about her own failures. Ashley deserves better than I can give her. The words came out before James could stop them. Truth escaping like water through cupped hands. Probably, but that's not actually the problem. What is? That you're trying to give her something you don't have. Wholeness. Complete presence. The version of yourself that existed before loss, carved pieces out. She wants pre-Michelle James, and he doesn't exist anymore. The accuracy of that assessment felt like a physical blow. Ashley had never known him before Michelle's diagnosis. Before the 2 years of watching her fade, before the funeral and the aftermath and the grinding work of solo parenthood. She'd met someone already marked by loss and then spent 10 months trying to sand those marks away. What do I do? You stop pretending. You tell her the truth, that you love Michelle's memory and always will. That Emily needs those bedtime stories and you need to tell them. That second love doesn't erase first love. It honors it by proving you can survive loss and still open your heart. Patricia's voice gained intensity, urgency, as if she were arguing not just for him but for herself. You demand she accept all of you or none of you. And if she can't, you walk away. Because anything else is a lie, and lies poison everything they touch. That's harsh. That's survival. I spent 8 years trying to outrun my grief, and all I did was lose my daughter's childhood and my own peace. You're trying to bury yours to please someone who doesn't understand it. Different methods, same mistake. James looked down at Emily's sleeping face, so peaceful now, and felt the weight of impossible choices. Choose Ashley's vision of the future and betray himself and his daughter. Choose honesty and lose the relationship entirely. There had to be a third option, some compromise that honored everyone. But even as he thought it, he knew Patricia was right. Some things couldn't be compromised. Some truths were non-negotiable. The night stretched on. They took turns feeding the fire, dozing fitfully, checking Emily's heart monitor and temperature. The storm showed no signs of breaking. Snow piled against the cabin door, visible through gaps in the weathered wood. If anything, the wind grew worse, howling like something alive and hungry. Around 3 in the morning, Patricia began talking again, this time unprompted, her words flowing in the darkness like confession. Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, 2005. I was there 2 days after the levees broke. The water, the bodies, the way people just floated in their own neighborhoods. I documented all of it. Won an award for one photo, a child's teddy bear snagged on a stop sign, the water line visible above it. She stopped, swallowed hard. Everyone praised the composition, the way it captured loss and innocence and tragedy in one frame. What they didn't know was that I'd found that bear in a house with 3 bodies. A family that had drowned in their own living room. And I photographed the bear instead of reporting the bodies right away because the light was perfect and I knew the shot would be powerful. James didn't know what to say. The admission hung between them, ugly and honest. I told myself I'd come back, that documenting was important, that those bodies weren't going anywhere. And I did come back 20 minutes later and reported it. But those 20 minutes, I chose art over humanity. Chose career over compassion. That's who I was, who I maybe still am. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what running from grief turns you into. I became someone who could see 3 dead bodies and think about camera angles. Someone who valued the perfect shot over immediate human decency. That's the endpoint of avoidance. You hollow yourself out until nothing's left but the work. Her voice cracked on the last word, and James understood this wasn't just about Katrina. This was about every assignment she'd taken, every disaster she'd covered, every time she'd chosen witness over participation. After my husband died, I could have stayed with Ashley, could have grieved with her, rebuilt with her, learned to be a whole person again together. Instead, I left her with my sister and went to cover a school shooting in Colorado, then a wildfire in California. Then a tornado in Oklahoma. I spent 8 years documenting tragedy because it was easier than sitting with my own. But you stopped eventually. I got old. Editors wanted younger photographers who could move faster, who hadn't developed reputations for being difficult. So I ended up behind a desk, editing other people's disaster coverage, and that's when I finally had to face what I'd done. Ashley was 25 by then. We barely knew each other. I'd missed everything. Her college years, her first jobs, her relationships. I'd become a stranger who shared her DNA. Emily stirred against James, made a small sound, settled again. He stroked her hair, the gesture automatic, grounding. Is that fixable? I don't know yet. We're trying. These last few years I've been trying to show up, be present, actually act like a mother, but the damage runs deep. She doesn't trust me not to leave. Which is why she's so desperate to lock you down. If she can make you choose her completely, prove that someone will stay, maybe it heals something in her. That's not fair to either of us. No, but trauma rarely is. They sat with that truth as the fire burned and the storm raged, and Emily slept on, innocent of the adult complexities swirling around her. James felt something shifting in his understanding. pieces clicking into place. Ashley's pressure, her need for commitment, her discomfort with Michelle's memory. None of it was really about him. It was about her own abandonment wound, her mother's 8-year absence, her bone-deep fear that people leave. Understanding it didn't fix it, but it clarified the impossible position he was in. He couldn't heal Ashley's childhood. He couldn't be the proof that people stay, not when staying required erasing parts of himself. That wasn't love. It was martyrdom, and martyrdom always breeds resentment. "When we get back," James said slowly, thinking through implications as he spoke, "I have to end it. Not because I don't care about her, but because I can't be what she needs." Probably wise, though she won't see it that way. "Will you tell her about this conversation?" Patricia considered, her face unreadable in the low light. "I'll tell her the truth if she asks directly. I won't volunteer it, but James, she's going to suspect something anyway. We've been trapped in a cabin all night, shared body heat, had intense conversations, in her mind already primed by abandonment fear. That's going to look like betrayal." Nothing happened. I know that, you know that, but fear doesn't care about facts. The implications settled over him like cold water. Even honesty might not be enough. Ashley's trauma lens would interpret this night through the filter of her worst fears, and no amount of explanation would penetrate that. "So I lose either way." "You lose her, yes, but you keep yourself and Emily. That's not nothing." It wasn't, but it still felt like failure, another relationship dissolving. More proof that he was fundamentally broken in ways that precluded normal human connection. Patricia seemed to read his thoughts. She shifted position, closer but not touching, her voice taking on the firm tone of someone delivering necessary truth. "Listen to me. You are not broken. You're grieving, which is normal. You're trying to honor your late wife while building a new life, which is healthy. You're putting your daughter's emotional needs first, which is right. The fact that Ashley can't meet you where you are doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're incompatible, that's all. Feels like more than that. Because you're still carrying Michelle's death as failure. Like if you'd loved her harder or tried different treatments or prayed better or something, she'd still be alive. And every relationship that ends after feels like confirmation that you're the problem." The words landed with surgical precision, cutting through defenses James hadn't realized he'd erected. He did feel that way, hadn't named it, hadn't examined it, but yes. Some part of him believed Michelle's death was punishment for some inadequacy in him. Cancer doesn't care about love. Patricia's voice gentled without losing its edge. It doesn't care about effort or prayer or deserving. It just is. And her dying wasn't your fault, any more than my husband's scaffolding collapse was mine. We didn't fail them. We just lost them. James felt tears on his face and didn't bother hiding them. This stranger who'd become something like a friend in one nightmarish day had given him permission he hadn't known he needed, to stop carrying blame he'd never earned. "Thank you." His voice came rough, abraded by emotion. "For understanding. We're the same, you and I. Just different timelines. You're 4 years out, I'm 10. But we're walking the same path, trying to figure out how to honor the dead while staying alive ourselves." Morning came slowly, gray light filtering through gaps in the cabin walls. The storm had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow covered everything, pristine and deadly beautiful. The door was blocked by drift, but between them James and Patricia managed to force it open enough to assess. The forest was unrecognizable, trees bent under snow weight, the trail completely buried, landmarks erased. But the storm had passed, and that meant rescue would come eventually. Patricia checked her phone, still dead, but she'd been rationing battery on a small emergency beacon she'd had in her pack. Professional paranoia, she'd called it, the result of too many close calls in the field. She activated it now, the small device pulsing silently, sending their location to search and rescue. Could be hours, could be longer. We have water, a little food. We'll be fine. Emily woke hungry and they shared granola bars Patricia had packed, melted snow for water, kept the fire going. James's daughter seemed remarkably unbothered by their situation, treating it like an adventure now that the immediate danger had passed. She drew pictures while they waited, the cabin, the fire, the two adults who'd kept her safe. One drawing in particular caught James's attention. Emily had sketched all four of them again, himself, her, Patricia, and Ashley. But the arrangement had changed. Patricia stood next to James now, their stick-figure hands almost touching. Ashley remained separate, turned away. And above them all, Michelle's purple ghost watched with what might have been approval. "Can I ask you something?" Emily looked up from her artwork, addressing Patricia with that direct gaze that made adults uncomfortable. "Of course. Are you going to be my grandma?" The question landed in the quiet cabin like a stone in still water. Patricia's face registered shock, then something softer, more complicated. "You're Ashley's mom, sweetie, that's—" "I know, but Ashley doesn't like talking about Mama Michelle. You do. You understand about missing people." Emily paused, choosing words with care. "Grandmas are supposed to understand things." James watched Patricia struggle with this, her careful composure cracking around the edges. She looked at him, seeking guidance, and he realized he had none to offer. His 6-year-old daughter had just invited a near stranger into their family structure, and the terrifying part was how right it felt. "I would be honored," Patricia said finally, her voice thick with emotion, "to be someone you can talk to about your mama, and about anything else. Whether that makes me a grandma or just a friend, we can figure out together." Emily nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. But something had shifted in the cabin's atmosphere. Some unspoken covenant formed. James caught Patricia's eye and saw his own wonder reflected back. How had they arrived here, in this impossible intimacy, in less than 24 hours? The answer came as clearly as Emily's drawings. Survival stripped away pretense. Fear revealed essential truths, and sometimes connection forged in crisis ran deeper than relationships built over months or years of careful distance. The helicopter found them around noon, its rotors cutting through pristine silence, a rescue team rappelling down because the snow was too deep for landing. They wrapped all three in thermal blankets, checked vitals, radioed ahead to the hospital. Emily was stable but needed monitoring. James and Patricia were cold and exhausted but otherwise fine. The flight to the hospital felt surreal. James watching the snow-covered mountains scroll beneath them. Emily pressed against his side. Patricia across the cramped space meeting his eyes with understanding that needed no words. They'd survived. But survival was just the beginning of complications. Ashley met them at the hospital, her face streaked with tears, her body vibrating with barely contained panic. She grabbed Emily first, checking her over with shaking hands, then turned to James, pulling him into an embrace that felt more like possession than comfort. "I thought I lost you. Oh God, I thought you were dead." "We're okay. Patricia got us to shelter, knew exactly what to do." Ashley pulled back, looked at her mother with an expression James couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with something darker, more complicated. "Thank you for saving them." Patricia nodded, neutral, professional. Just did what needed doing. The doctor who'd examined Emily approached with good news. Her heart had weathered the stress better than feared, no permanent damage, but they wanted to keep her overnight for observation. James agreed immediately, and within an hour Emily was settled in a pediatric room, already drowsy from warm blankets and safety. Ashley pulled him aside in the hallway while Patricia stayed with Emily, giving them privacy. "I need to know exactly what happened. Everything." James told her, keeping to facts. The storm, getting lost, the cabin, sharing warmth for survival, the long night waiting for rescue. He didn't mention the conversations, the confessions, the way Patricia had understood things Ashley never could. Those felt private, sacred even. And some instinct told him Ashley wasn't ready to hear them. But Ashley's face tightened anyway, suspicion flickering in her eyes. You were alone with her all night, just you and her and Emily. We were surviving, Ashley, that's all. Were you? Her voice dropped, gaining an edge he'd never heard before. Because it's convenient, isn't it? You go on this hike with my mom, the woman who understands grief, the woman who doesn't ask you to move on. You get trapped together, you bond, and I'm supposed to just accept that nothing happened? Nothing did happen. I found her scarf in your jacket pocket last week, James, when I was going to donate it. Her scarf with a piece missing tucked away like a secret. His mind raced. The scarf, Patricia had wrapped it around Emily at some point during the night, and he'd pocketed the piece that had torn off, meaning to return it. But now, through Ashley's lens of abandonment and fear, it looked like evidence of something illicit. She lent it to Emily for warmth. A piece tore. I was going to give it back. When? You've had it for a week. I forgot. We've been busy and it was just a scarf and then I see texts on your phone. From her. Thank you for showing me I can heal. What does that mean, James? What did you show her? This was spiraling. Fear overtaking reason, Ashley's worst instincts activated by circumstantial evidence that meant nothing and everything. We talked about grief, about our dead spouses, that's all. That's not all! Ashley's voice rose loud enough that a passing nurse glanced over with concern. She lowered it to an intense whisper. You connect with her in ways you never connect with me. She gets parts of you I've been begging for access to for 10 months. And now you've spent a night alone with her, sharing body heat, having deep conversations while I was terrified you were dead. James felt the trap closing, saw no way out that didn't require lies or surrender. So he chose the only path left, truth even if it destroyed everything. You're right. Patricia understands things about me you don't. Not because you're not smart or caring, but because she's lived through what I'm living through. She knows grief from the inside. And I don't. I've never lost anyone. Your father died 10 years ago, and from what you've told me, you were already estranged from him. That's not the same as losing your spouse, the person you built a life with, the mother of your child. Ashley flinched as if struck. So my grief doesn't count because it's not your grief? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? James looked at her. This woman he'd tried to love, tried to become whole for, tried to mold himself into the shape she needed, and felt the last illusions fall away. I'm saying I can't be what you need. You want someone all in, no reservations, no competing loyalties. You want someone who'll erase his past to make you feel secure. And I can't do that. Michelle's memory isn't competition. Emily's need to remember her mother isn't optional. And if that makes you feel like you're not enough, I'm sorry, but I won't lie and say it's going to change. The words landed with finality, and Ashley's face crumpled, fury and hurt warring for dominance. This is about her, isn't it? About my mother. You spent one night with her and now you're ending things with me. This is about me, about what I can and can't offer. Patricia has nothing to do with it. Liar. Ashley's voice broke. You're choosing her over me, my own mother. I'm choosing honesty over performance. There's a difference. Ashley stared at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, and James felt the weight of hurting someone who'd never been anything but kind to him. But kindness wasn't enough. Compatibility mattered. Truth mattered. And some gaps couldn't be bridged by good intentions. We're done. Ashley's voice went flat, emotionless, shock setting in. I can't. I won't do this. Choose someone who can give you what you need, because clearly I can't. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the sterile hospital corridor, and James felt the relationship end with each fading step. No dramatic scene, no thrown objects or screamed accusations. Just a woman walking away because the man she'd tried to save couldn't be saved, at least not in the way she'd wanted. He returned to Emily's room, found Patricia still there, sitting beside his daughter's bed, reading her a story from a book she'd somehow procured from the hospital's children's library. Emily was awake but drowsy, smiling at whatever tale Patricia was spinning. Patricia looked up as he entered, read his face, understood immediately. "She left." "Yeah. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You were right, it needed to end." Emily's eyes tracked between them, picking up on adult tensions even through her exhaustion. "Is Miss Ashley mad?" "A little, baby girl, but it's not your fault. Adult stuff, okay?" Emily accepted this with the resilience of children who've learned that adult problems are vast and incomprehensible. She yawned, the book forgotten, sleep pulling her under. James took the chair on the other side of the bed, and for a while he and Patricia sat in silence, watching his daughter sleep, processing the wreckage of the last 30 hours. "She thinks something happened between us." James kept his voice low, mindful of Emily's rest. "Did it?" The question hung in the air. Had something happened? Not romance, not betrayal, but something had shifted in that cabin. Connection formed, understanding reached, the kind of bone-deep recognition that usually took years to develop. Not what she thinks, but something. Patricia nodded slowly. The kind of something that can't be explained to someone who wasn't there. Yeah. They fell back into silence, but it felt different now, charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. James knew he should feel guilty about the breakup, about hurting Ashley, about the timing. Instead, he felt relief. And beneath that, something more dangerous, curiosity about what came next. But next would have to wait. Right now, Emily needed him present, needed stability and reassurance that her world wasn't crumbling. Everything else, his relationship with Patricia, Ashley's hurt, the future's uncertain shape, could wait until his daughter was safe and healed. Patricia seemed to sense his thoughts. She stood, gathering her coat. "I should go, give you space, but James—" She paused at the door, her expression serious. "What happened in that cabin wasn't a mistake. The honesty, the connection, even this." She gestured at the hospital room, the wreckage of relationships and near death and truth. None of it was a mistake. Sometimes survival requires more than just staying alive. She left before he could respond, and James was alone with his sleeping daughter and thoughts that refused to settle. Through the window he could see snow-covered mountains in the distance, beautiful and deadly, the same peaks that had nearly killed them and somehow saved them. Emily murmured in her sleep something that sounded like "Mama," and James reached over to hold her hand, that small anchor to present reality. Michelle would have approved of his honesty with Ashley, he thought, would have hated seeing him diminish himself to fit someone else's expectations. She'd taught him that integrity mattered more than comfort, that truth was worth the cost. The question was whether he'd have the courage to live that lesson going forward, or whether this was just a moment of crisis clarity that would fade when life returned to normal. But even as he thought it, James knew normal was gone. The cabin had burned it away, and whatever came next would have to be built from honesty and grief and the hard work of learning to live with both. The hospital discharged Emily the following afternoon with instructions for rest and follow-up appointments. James carried her to his car, her small arms wrapped around his neck, her weight familiar and precious. She'd been quiet since waking, processing the adventure and its aftermath with that internal gravity children sometimes possess. Patricia had left hours earlier, citing work deadlines and the need to give them space. She'd hugged Emily goodbye, shaken James's hand with formal distance, and walked out of the hospital without looking back. The absence felt deliberate, a boundary being established after the cabin's forced intimacy. Ashley hadn't returned. No texts, no calls, nothing but silence that spoke volumes. James told himself he'd reach out in a few days, try to end things properly with respect and closure, but some part of him knew the ending had already happened in that hallway. Final and irreversible. Denver welcomed them back with gray skies and the grinding routine of normal life. James returned to work deadlines he'd missed, apologetic emails to clients, the mechanical tasks of freelancing that paid bills but required no emotional investment. Emily went back to school where her classmates treated the mountain survival story like celebrity status, begging for details she supplied with artistic embellishment. 3 weeks passed. James established new rhythms: work, school pickup, dinner, homework, bedtime stories about Michelle that felt less like obligation now and more like gift. Emily thrived on the routine, her heart monitor showing steady improvement, the mountain's stress leaving no permanent mark on her small body. But it had marked James. He found himself thinking about Patricia's words at odd moments, while coding, while cooking, while lying awake at 3 in the morning, about running from grief, about honesty versus performance, about survival requiring more than just staying alive. He hadn't contacted her, hadn't known what to say, how to navigate the strange territory between strangers and friends, between his ex-girlfriend's mother and someone who'd seen him at his most vulnerable. So he defaulted to silence, letting weeks accumulate like snowdrift. Then Emily's heart monitor started beeping irregularly again. Just once during dinner, but once was enough to send ice through his veins. He checked her over, called the pediatric cardiologist who recommended bringing her in for evaluation. "Stress," the doctor said over the phone. "Something's causing stress." That night, after Emily had finally fallen asleep clutching her stuffed elephant, James sat in his living room staring at Michelle's photo on the mantel. 4 years since her death. 4 years of carrying grief like extra weight, of trying to build a life around a hole that never filled, and suddenly the exhaustion of it crashed over him. Not the grief itself, which felt permanent and right, but the performance, the pretending to be fine. The walls built so high even he couldn't see over them anymore. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but he recognized the area code, Boulder. The message was brief. "Emily's drawing arrived in the mail today. She's very talented. Tell her thank you." Patricia James stared at the words, trying to decode their meaning. Emily must have mailed one of her cabin drawings without telling him. Some gesture of connection his daughter had initiated independently. The fact that Patricia had texted, had reached out first, felt significant. He typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on simple honesty. "She misses you. So do I." The reply came fast. "I've been giving you space, wasn't sure you wanted contact." His fingers moved before his brain could stop them. "Can we talk? In person?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Tomorrow? There's a coffee shop halfway between us. I'll text you the address." James set down his phone with shaking hands. This felt like stepping off a cliff, not knowing if the ground below was solid or abyss. But Patricia had been right about one thing. Survival required more than just staying alive. At some point, you had to start living again. The coffee shop sat in a small mountain town between Denver and Boulder, the kind of place tourists stopped for bathroom breaks on their way to ski resorts. James arrived first, chose a corner table with view of the door, ordered black coffee he didn't drink. His stomach was too knotted for caffeine. Patricia walked in exactly on time, her punctuality suggesting military discipline or journalist deadlines or both. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, and the small change made her look younger, less armored. She got tea, joined him at the table, and for a moment they just sat, the awkwardness of their last meeting hanging between them like humidity. "How's Emily?" Patricia's voice carried genuine concern, not just polite inquiry. "Better, mostly. She had an episode 3 nights ago. Heart monitor went irregular." Patricia's face tightened with worry. "Did you take her in?" "Talked to her cardiologist. He thinks it's stress. From the cabin? From everything. The storm, Ashley leaving, the upheaval. Kids absorb more than we think." James paused, then plunged ahead into deeper water. "She asks about you. Wants to know when she can see you again." Something in Patricia's expression shifted, defenses cracking. I've wanted to reach out, but with Ashley, it felt wrong, like I'd be choosing you over my daughter. Is that what this would be? Choosing? I don't know what this is. Patricia's honesty was characteristic, unflinching. We spent one night in a cabin, had some intense conversations. That doesn't mean... I don't know what it means. James took a breath, committing to the risk. It means I can talk to you about things I can't talk to anyone else about. It means you understand parts of me that even my closest friends don't see. It means when Emily's monitor went off, you were the first person I wanted to call. James, let me finish. He needed to say this before courage failed. I'm not asking for anything. I know the situation is complicated. You're Ashley's mother. We met under bizarre circumstances. There's probably a dozen reasons this is a terrible idea. But that night in the cabin, you said survival requires more than staying alive. I think I'm finally understanding what you meant. Patricia's hands wrapped around her tea mug, knuckles white with tension. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I've spent 10 years running from connection. Work was safer than people. Other people's tragedies were easier than my own. And then I spent a night in a cabin with a man who actually does the hard work I'd been avoiding, raising his kid alone, honoring his dead wife, trying to build something real despite the grief. You know what that made me feel? What? Ashamed and hopeful, in equal measure. She looked up, met his eyes. I can't be what Ashley needs right now. Can't be the mother who validates her victim narrative about us. And that's killing me. But I also can't lie and say nothing happened in that cabin. Maybe not what she fears, but something that matters anyway. The admission hung between them, honest and terrifying. James felt his heart rate accelerate, felt the ground shifting beneath carefully constructed life. So what do we do? I don't know, but I know I want to try to find out. They talked for 3 hours, coffee shop staff refilling drinks and clearing tables around them while they negotiated the impossible terrain of timing and ethics and wounded daughters and dead spouses. By the time they left, they'd established fragile framework, honesty, patience, and Emily's well-being as North Star for all decisions. Patricia would reach out to Ashley, try to repair that relationship regardless of what happened with James. He would focus on his daughter's recovery, on stability and routine. And they would see each other carefully, slowly, in ways that honored the complexity without pretending it didn't exist. It wasn't romance, wasn't even really dating. Just two people who'd survived something together, trying to figure out if survival could become foundation for something more. That weekend, Patricia came to Denver. Not to James's apartment, but to meet him and Emily at a park, neutral territory. Emily had exploded with joy at seeing her again, dragging her to the playground equipment, chattering nonstop about school and friends and the drawings she'd been making. James watched from a bench as Patricia pushed Emily on swings, his daughter's laughter bright against autumn air. Michelle would have liked this, he thought, would have approved of someone who treated Emily like a whole person instead of fragile thing to be protected. Patricia caught his eye across the playground, raised an eyebrow in question. Okay? He nodded, and something in his chest loosened. Not healing exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The permission to move forward without forgetting. To build new connections while honoring old ones. But the peace shattered a week later when Ashley showed up at his apartment unannounced. James opened the door to find her standing in his hallway, makeup smudged, eyes red from crying. Behind her stood an older woman he didn't recognize, well-dressed and stern-faced. We need to talk. Ashley's voice shook with barely controlled emotion. This is my Aunt Karen, my mom's sister. James's stomach dropped. He'd known confrontation was inevitable, but he'd hoped for more time, more distance, something. Can we come in? He stepped aside, letting them into his living room where Emily's drawings covered every surface and Michelle's photo still held its place on the mantel. Ashley's eyes went to that photo immediately, her face hardening. "Emily's at school," James said, trying to project calm he didn't feel. "Whatever this is, we have maybe an hour before I need to pick her up." Karen spoke first, her voice carrying authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm here because my niece came to me devastated. Said her boyfriend and her mother had an affair in a cabin during a storm. Said they've been seeing each other since." "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen?" Ashley's voice broke. "Because all I know is you broke up with me, and now you're spending time with my mom, and Emily draws pictures of the three of you like you're already a family." James looked at Ashley and saw not the woman he'd dated but a wounded chit, her abandonment fears confirmed by the exact scenario she'd most dreaded. Truth wouldn't fix this. Her pain was too deep, too old, rooted in childhood trauma he couldn't heal. But he tried anyway. "Nothing romantic or physical happened in that cabin. We shared body heat for survival. We talked about grief because we both understand loss, that's all. And now we're friends. People who understand each other, who want to be in each other's lives." "Friends?" Ashley spat the word like poison. "You're friends with my mother, the woman who abandoned me for 8 years, the woman who chose her career over me every single time, and you expect me to believe there's nothing more to it? I expect you to accept the truth. The truth is you replaced me with her." Ashley's composure shattered completely, tears streaming. "One night alone and she got everything I'd been begging for. Your honesty, your vulnerability, access to the parts of you that you kept locked away from me. How is that not betrayal?" Karen stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Ashley's shoulder. "My niece has a right to her feelings, and I have concerns about the appropriateness of your relationship with Patricia given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" James felt anger rising, burning through his careful control. "Two widowed people finding unexpected understanding, supporting each other's grief in ways our respective partners couldn't. That's not inappropriate, that's human. It's a violation of boundaries." Karen's voice stayed level, prosecutorial. "You dated Ashley for nearly a year. Her mother was part of that family system. Pursuing any kind of relationship with Patricia, romantic or otherwise, is at minimum questionable judgment." "I'm not pursuing anything. We're navigating something neither of us expected. With my daughter as collateral damage." Ashley's voice went quiet, deadly. "I came here to give you a chance to make this right. To choose, me or her." The ultimatum hung in the room like smoke. James looked at Ashley, really looked, and saw clearly for the first time. She didn't want him. She wanted proof that someone would stay, that someone would choose her over her mother, that she mattered more than the woman who'd abandoned her. He couldn't give her that, not honestly, not without lying about what Patricia meant to him, about the connection forged in that cabin, about the future he was starting to imagine. "I can't make that choice." Ashley's face crumpled. "Then you've already made it." "No. I'm refusing to choose at all. You and Patricia, your relationship is yours to fix or not. It's not about me. What happened with us ended because we're incompatible, not because of your mother." "Liar!" The word came out venomous. "You're choosing her. Admit it." James felt the trap closing, saw no way out that didn't involve someone getting hurt. So he chose the path that hurt least people long-term, even if it destroyed everything short-term. "I'm choosing honesty. I'm choosing not to build a relationship on pretending Michelle never existed. I'm choosing Emily's emotional health over romantic convenience. If that means I'm choosing Patricia too, then yes. But not instead of you. Just in addition to being myself." The distinction was too fine for Ashley's pain to register. She turned to her aunt, her voice breaking. "I can't be here. I can't watch this." Karen glared at James with undisguised contempt. "You should be ashamed, using my niece's trauma against her, pursuing her mother while she's vulnerable." "I'm not using anyone," James's voice stayed steady through force of will. And Patricia isn't vulnerable. She's the strongest person I've ever met. You want to be angry at someone? Be angry at her for the 8 years she was gone, but don't put that on me. How dare you? Aunt Karen, please. Ashley put a hand on the older woman's arm. Let's go. He's not worth it. They moved toward the door, and James felt the finality of it. Not just the relationship ending, but any possibility of civil conclusion. Ashley would hate him now, would tell their story through the lens of betrayal and wrongness. He'd become the villain in her narrative, the proof that people leave, that trust is foolish. At the door, Ashley turned back one last time. I hope she's worth it, because you just destroyed any chance of her having a relationship with me. The door closed behind them with decisive click, and James stood alone in his apartment, surrounded by his daughter's artwork and his late wife's memory, feeling the weight of consequences settle over him like snow. He texted Patricia. Ashley and her aunt just left. It's bad. Her response came immediately. I know. Karen called me. We need to talk. They met that evening at Patricia's Boulder apartment, a small space filled with photography equipment and books. Evidence of a life built around witness rather than participation. She looked exhausted, older than her 49 years, the cost of the day written in every line of her face. Ashley won't speak to me. Patricia's voice was flat, shock underneath. Karen called and said I'd betrayed my daughter by pursuing her ex-boyfriend, that I'd damaged her irreparably. I'm sorry. Don't be. This was inevitable. She moved to her window, staring out at Boulder's mountain views. I spent 8 years abandoning Ashley. She was always going to find a reason to confirm I'm the villain. You just happened to be the catalyst. Still, I don't want to be the reason you lose your daughter. Patricia turned to face him, and in her eyes James saw the same calculation he'd been running, weighing connection against cost, possibility against price. Here's what I know. I can grovel, apologize, promise to never see you again, and maybe Ashley forgives me. Maybe. Or I can tell the truth, that I care about you and Emily, that what started in that cabin matters, that I'm finally trying to stop running from connection. She paused, voice strengthening. I've made enough choices out of fear. I'm done. Even if it means losing Ashley. I already lost Ashley. 8 years ago, when I chose a hurricane over her graduation, a shooting over her college move-in, a wildfire over Christmas, I lost her through 1,000 small abandonments, and one more won't make the difference. But choosing fear over truth now, that would cost me something I can't afford to lose. What's that? Myself, the person I'm trying to become. James moved closer, not touching, but near enough to feel her warmth, her presence, her reality. And who's that? Someone who stays, someone who shows up, someone who values honesty over comfort. Patricia's voice dropped to near whisper. Someone who might deserve a second chance at family. The words landed like benediction. James reached for her hand, felt her fingers intertwine with his, the first deliberately romantic touch they'd shared. It felt different than it had with Ashley. Not safer, but more real. Built on foundation of truth instead of performance. Emily's going to ask questions. About us, about Ashley, about what this means. Then we tell her the truth, that adults sometimes hurt each other trying to be honest, that families are complicated, that love doesn't erase other love, it adds to it. She already knows most of that. She does. She's wise beyond her years. Patricia squeezed his hand, like her father. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, future uncertain. But the uncertainty felt less terrifying than it had. Not because anything was guaranteed, but because they'd both chosen truth over safety, connection over protection. The phone call came 3 days later. Ashley's voice, cold and formal, no greeting. I need you both at Mom's apartment, tomorrow, 2 p.m. My therapist will be there. Patricia confirmed on speakerphone, her face unreadable. After hanging up, she looked at James with concern. This is either reconciliation or formal cutting of ties. Which do you think? With Ashley? Could go either way. The next afternoon, they arrived separately at Patricia's apartment to find Ashley already there, sitting rigid on the couch next to a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a notebook. The therapist introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, Ashley's counselor for the past 6 months. "Thank you both for coming." Dr. Chen's voice was professional but warm. "Ashley asked me to mediate this conversation because there are things she needs to say, and she wants witness to ensure everyone's heard." James and Patricia sat in separate chairs, the arrangement deliberate, not presenting as couple but not denying connection either. Ashley looked at her mother first, eyes red but voice steady. "I need you to know what you did, not just now, but all of it. Every missed birthday, every school event you weren't at, every time I called crying and you were in some disaster zone prioritizing strangers over your own child." Patricia's face remained neutral, but James saw her hands trembling in her lap. "I know." "Do you?" Ashley's voice gained intensity. "Do you know what it's like to watch other kids' parents show up while mine was photographing dead bodies in New Orleans? To explain to friends that my mom cared more about her career than me? To build my entire personality around not needing you because needing hurt too much? I know I failed you. I know sorry isn't enough. It's not." Ashley turned to James, her gaze hardening. "And you knew all this. You knew my abandonment issues, knew how hard it was for me to trust, and you still chose her." "I chose honesty. That included being honest that we weren't right for each other. Because of her. Because of me." James held her gaze. "Because I can't be with someone who needs me to erase my past. That's not about Patricia. That's about Michelle and Emily and who I am." Dr. Chen interjected gently. "Ashley, remember what we discussed. You can't control other people's choices, only your response to them." Ashley's jaw clenched, tears threatening. She pulled out a drawing, one of Emily's, and placed it on the coffee table. It showed 4 figures, James, Patricia, Emily, and Michelle's purple ghost. All connected by lines, a family constellation that included the dead. "Emily sent this to me, with a note." Ashley's voice broke. It said, "Miss Ashley, you can be in the picture too if you want. There's room for everyone." The room went silent. James felt his throat close, pride and pain mixing. His 6-year-old daughter, wise beyond measure, offering inclusion to someone who'd walked away. "She's right, you know." Patricia spoke quietly. "There is room. Not for romantic relationship between you and James, that ship has sailed, but for you and me to try again. For you to be in Emily's life if you want, for us to be complicated and messy and still family." "How?" Ashley's composure shattered. "How can we be family when you're with him? We're not together. Not officially. Not yet." Patricia glanced at James, seeking confirmation. "We're figuring out what we are. But whatever that becomes, it doesn't erase you. Families grow. They don't replace." The words echoed Emily's drawing caption, and something in Ashley's face shifted. Not acceptance exactly, but recognition. The child she'd dismissed as obstacle understood something the adults had been fighting over. Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Ashley, what do you need to feel heard right now?" Ashley wiped her eyes, considering. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, younger. The child underneath the adult hurt. "I need Mom to admit she was wrong. Not just about now, about everything. About choosing work over me. About abandoning me. About making me feel like I didn't matter." Patricia stood, moved to kneel in front of her daughter, taking her hands despite Ashley's initial resistance. "I was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I chose witness over participation, documentation over presence, running over staying. I told myself I was doing important work, and maybe some of it was. But none of it was more important than you. Nothing was, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. Say it again. Ashley's voice broke on the words, desperate for something she'd never gotten. Patricia didn't hesitate. I abandoned you. I chose wrong. You deserved better. You deserved a mother who stayed. Ashley collapsed into sobs, and Patricia pulled her close, holding her daughter while she cried years of accumulated pain. James looked away, giving them privacy in the public moment, feeling the weight of truth-telling. Dr. Chen caught his eye, nodded toward the door. He slipped out quietly, leaving mother and daughter to their reckoning, and waited in the hallway with thoughts spiraling. This could still go wrong. Ashley could demand Patricia choose, could make his relationship with Patricia contingent on losing Emily. The therapist's presence suggested Ashley was trying to heal, but healing was messy, non-linear, fraught with backsliding. The door opened 15 minutes later. Dr. Chen emerged, gave him a small smile. You can come back in. Ashley and Patricia sat together on the couch now, hands clasped, both tear-stained but calmer. Ashley looked up as James entered, her expression complex, hurt still there but softer now, mixed with something else. I can't give you my blessing. I'm not there yet, maybe never will be. But Dr. Chen helped me see that my relationship with Mom is separate from yours with her. I can work on one without controlling the other. I appreciate that. Don't! Ashley's voice gained edge. Don't appreciate it like I'm doing you a favor. I'm doing this for me, because holding on to rage is exhausting and I'm tired. Fair enough. She stood, gathering her things. At the door, she paused, looking back at Patricia. I need space, real space, months probably, and therapy, lots of therapy. But maybe, if you actually show up this time, if you prove you're different, maybe we can rebuild something. I'll be here, however long it takes. Ashley nodded once, then left without acknowledging James further. The door closed and Patricia sagged against the couch, emotionally depleted. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. James sat beside her, taking her hand. You did it, though. Told the truth. Owned your mistakes. Doesn't feel like victory. No, but it's foundation. You can build on truth, can't build on lies. Patricia leaned against him and they sat in silence, processing the wreckage and possibility in equal measure. Outside, bolder afternoon light painted mountains gold, indifferent to human drama. Where does this leave us? Patricia's question carried genuine uncertainty. Figuring it out, one day at a time. What about Emily? Does she know about any of this? She knows I care about you, knows you care about us. The rest, we can tell her when there's something definite to tell. And if there never is? James considered that possibility. What if this connection, forged in crisis, couldn't survive normal life? What if they were trauma-bonded, mistaking intensity for compatibility? Then we're still friends, still people who understand each other, still better for having been honest. Patricia turned to look at him, really look. And James saw something in her eyes he recognized. The same cautious hope he felt, the same terror of risking again after loss, the same desperate want to believe second chances existed. I don't know how to do this. Build something new while honoring something old. Be present without running. Stay without feeling trapped. Neither do I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, a question more than answer. James responded with the same uncertainty, the same hope, the same acknowledgement that this was risk worth taking. They pulled apart and Patricia's expression had shifted. Less guarded, more open, the walls she'd built against connection showing their first cracks. I should tell you something, before we go any further. Okay. I'm scared, terrified actually, of failing again, of hurting you or Emily, of becoming the person who runs when things get hard, of proving everyone right who says this is too complicated. I'm scared too, of betraying Michelle's memory, of confusing Emily, of building something that collapses, of being hurt again. So we're both terrified. Completely. Patricia laughed, the sound startled and genuine. That's either the worst foundation for a relationship or the most honest one. Probably both. 8 months crawled past. Ashley entered intensive therapy, working through abandonment trauma with Dr. Chen's guidance. She blocked James on all platforms but maintained minimal contact with Patricia. Brief texts, occasional coffee meetings that Patricia reported as painful but progress. James and Patricia moved carefully, dating in the traditional sense but with Emily always factored in. Park trips, museum visits, dinners where his daughter's presence ensured appropriate boundaries. They talked about everything, grief and parenting and work and the future's uncertain shape. They didn't live together, didn't make grand promises, just showed up consistently and chose honesty when easier lies beckoned. Emily thrived. Her heart condition stabilized completely, the cardiologist attributing it to reduced stress and emotional consistency. She drew constantly, her artwork evolving from stick figures to more sophisticated portraits, always including Michelle's purple ghost watching over her expanding family. 14 months after the cabin, Patricia got a text from Ashley. "Mom, can we talk? Really talk?" They met at a neutral restaurant, Dr. Chen present for the first 30 minutes before excusing herself, trusting them to navigate alone. Ashley looked different, lighter somehow, the anger that had hardened her features softened by therapeutic work. "I've been thinking about Emily's drawing, the one where she said there's room for everyone." Patricia waited, letting her daughter control the pace. "I want that to be true. Not for James. I don't think I'll ever be comfortable with you two together. But for us, for mother-daughter us, I want that too. I have conditions." Ashley's voice steadied, the therapeutic work evident in her ability to assert needs without aggression. "You show up, consistently. You don't disappear into work when things get uncomfortable. You choose me sometimes, even when it's hard. I can do that. I am doing that. Prove it. Weekly dinners, just us. No James, no Emily, no distractions. Prove you can prioritize me." Patricia agreed without hesitation, and over the following months, she kept that promise. Every Thursday, mother and daughter met for dinner, working through years of accumulated hurt, one conversation at a time. Progress came in inches, a shared laugh here, a vulnerability there, slowly rebuilding foundation that abandonment had eroded. James watched from the sidelines, supporting Patricia through the difficult conversations, celebrating small victories, holding her when setbacks threatened to overwhelm. His own relationship with Ashley remained non-existent, but he understood. Some wounds were too deep for reconciliation, and that had to be okay. 2 years and 3 months after the cabin, Patricia moved to Denver. Not into James's apartment, but her own place 15 minutes away. Close enough for daily contact, but separate enough to maintain independence both needed. Emily was 8 now, thriving in 3rd grade, her artwork good enough that her teacher recommended advanced classes. She split time between homes easily, treating Patricia's apartment as extension of family rather than separate entity. The evening Patricia finished unpacking, she invited James and Emily over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and the comfortable domesticity of people who'd learned to be themselves together. After dinner, Emily presented Patricia with a new drawing. This one showed 5 figures: James, Emily, Patricia, Michelle's ghost, and a new addition. Ashley no longer turned away but facing the others, still separate but included in the constellation. "Is this true?" Patricia's voice was thick with emotion. "Is Ashley okay with being in the picture now?" "I don't know, but I left space for her in case she wants to be." That night, after Emily had fallen asleep on Patricia's couch, the 2 adults stood on her balcony looking at Denver's lights, the mountains' dark shadows against darker sky. "I need to ask you something." Patricia's voice carried nervousness unusual for her. "And I need you to be honest, even if it hurts." "Okay. Is this real? What we have, or is it trauma bonding that we've mistaken for something more?" James had asked himself the same question countless times. The answer had evolved as they'd evolved, moving from crisis intensity to everyday consistency. It's real, not instead of what I had with Michelle, different from that, but real in its own right. How do you know? Because it survived the boring parts, the arguments about nothing, the days when grief makes me terrible company, the times when your work stress makes you shut down. We've seen each other's worst and chosen to stay anyway. Patricia leaned against him and James wrapped his arms around her, feeling the rightness of it. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but honest. Michelle would have liked you. The words came without thought, truth spoken into night air. She'd have respected your honesty, appreciated your directness, approved of how you treat Emily. You think about her a lot still. Every day, but differently now. Less like wound, more like foundation. She taught me what love could be. You're teaching me what it can become. Patricia turned in his arms, her expression serious. Say it again. The callback to their early conversations, to the demand for vulnerability that had become their signature, made him smile. Michelle was my first love. You're teaching me about second chances. Both truths can exist. She kissed him, and it felt different than their first tentative explorations. Deeper, surer, built on 2 years of consistent choosing rather than crisis intensity. When they pulled apart, Patricia's eyes shone with tears. I love you. I should have said it before, but I was scared. I love you too, have for a while. Even though I'm difficult and damaged and come with a daughter who hates you. Ashley doesn't hate me. She hates what I represent. There's a difference. James paused, choosing his next words carefully. And you're not damaged. You're honest about your scars. That's different. They went inside, checked on Emily still sleeping peacefully on the couch, and settled in chairs across from each other with tea and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. What happens next? Patricia asked eventually. With us, I mean. We keep doing what we're doing, showing up, being honest, building something that honors our pasts without being imprisoned by them. That's not very romantic. No, but it's real, and real's better than romantic. Patricia smiled, genuine and unguarded. Emily's rubbing off on you. That sounds like something she'd say. She's wise beyond her years. She gets that from her father. They sat in Patricia's new apartment, Emily asleep nearby, Denver sprawling below, and James felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Complete. Not because the grief was gone or the complications resolved, but because he'd finally learned what survival really meant. Not just staying alive, but choosing to live. Not erasing the past, but building on it. Not running from loss, but learning to carry it while still opening to connection. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. How's the move going? When do we meet this mystery woman properly? He showed Patricia, who raised an eyebrow. Mystery woman, that's one way to put it. Want to do Sunday dinner? You, me, Emily, my mom? That's a big step, meeting the family. We've met each other's daughters. My mother's easy compared to that. Patricia laughed, and the sound filled her apartment with warmth. Okay, Sunday dinner, but I'm bringing wine. Lots of wine. Deal. The next morning, James woke in his own bed with sun streaming through windows and Emily's artwork covering his walls. Michelle's photo still held its place on the mantel, but beside it now sat a newer picture. Him, Emily, and Patricia at the zoo, Emily between them with gap-toothed grin. His daughter padded into his room, climbing into bed for their morning ritual of lazy conversation before the day's demands intruded. Daddy, is Miss Patricia going to be my new mom? The question landed without warning, cutting through easy comfort. James pulled Emily close, choosing honesty as always. Miss Patricia is someone who cares about us very much. But she's not replacing your Mama Michelle. You only get one mom, and yours was incredible. I know, but can I have two? Mama Michelle in my heart and Miss Patricia here. James felt tears prick his eyes. His daughter had articulated what he'd been struggling to explain. That love expanded rather than replaced. That second chances didn't erase first loves. That families grew in unexpected ways. Yeah, baby girl. You can have both. Good. Emily snuggled closer, then added with characteristic wisdom. Mama Michelle would like that. She told me in a dream. She said Miss Patricia has kind eyes. Whether the dream was real or Emily's way of processing complex adult emotions, it didn't matter. What mattered was his daughter giving him permission he hadn't known he needed. To move forward without forgetting, to love again without betraying, to build new family while honoring old. That afternoon, he took Emily to Patricia's apartment to help finish unpacking. They found her surrounded by boxes, photography equipment scattered everywhere, looking overwhelmed but happy. Emily immediately began organizing books by color while the adults tackled kitchen supplies. It felt domestic, normal, the boring work of building life together. Patricia's phone rang, Ashley's name on the screen. She glanced at James, seeking support, then answered. Hey, sweetie. James couldn't hear the other side, but he watched Patricia's face shift through emotions. Surprise, hope, cautious joy. Are you sure? That would mean a lot. Thursday dinner, 6 p.m. I'll be there. She hung up, staring at the phone with wonder. Ashley wants to try family dinners, her, me, and eventually, if I'm okay with it, Dr. Chen thinks including you and Emily might help her see we're not a threat to her relationship with me. Eventually is fine, we've got time. Yeah, we do. Emily appeared from the bedroom carrying Michelle's old scarf, the one Patricia had lent her in the cabin, the piece James had pocketed that had caused so much misunderstanding. Miss Patricia, I found this in your closet. Why do you have Mama's color? Patricia knelt to Emily's level, touching the purple fabric gently. Your daddy gave it to me, to remember the night we all took care of each other. Emily considered this, processing. Then she wrapped the scarf around Patricia's neck, standing back to admire her work. You should keep it. Mama would want you to have her color, because you're family now. In that moment, with his daughter conferring blessing and his girlfriend accepting it with tears in her eyes, James understood that healing wasn't linear. It was messy, complicated, required constant choosing and re-choosing. But it was also possible. Second chances existed. Love could grow in spaces carved by loss. That evening, the three of them ordered pizza and ate on Patricia's balcony, watching mountains turn purple with sunset. Emily chattered about school while adults listened with half attention, more focused on the miracle of ordinary moment, the gift of shared present. Later, after Emily had fallen asleep and Patricia walked them to James's car, she held him close in the parking lot, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you for being patient with me, with Ashley, with all of this mess. Thank you for teaching me that survival can become living. They kissed goodnight and James drove home with his daughter sleeping in the back seat, Michelle's memory in his heart and Patricia's future in his hope. The road ahead was uncertain, Ashley's healing, family integration, the daily work of relationship building, but uncertainty felt less terrifying now, felt like possibility instead of threat, because some doors once opened led not to endings but beginnings, and sometimes the storm that nearly killed you showed you exactly where home was waiting.